Welcome to this month's installment of our series called Parenting Hacks, and it's trying to make life easier virtually. And this month, we are so excited to welcome two representatives of the Transportation Security Administration. Did I get that right? Yes. And one is Lori Dankers, and one I'm going to let you introduce Teresa for us. And a couple quick points before we get started is we are recording this session, and we also, if you please feel free to use the chat feature if you have any questions, and then either Joe or myself will go ahead and bring those forward as it's appropriate during the presentation. So I want to welcome both of you and thank you for coming and joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Mara. Appreciate that. Teresa and I are actually very pleased to be here because one of the most important things we can do is talk to people, tell them about the things that we have available for travelers ahead of the time that they travel so that they can be prepared. We know a prepared traveler has the most successful experience through the security checkpoint. So my name is Lori Dankers. I'm a TSA spokeswoman. I cover the West Coast and handle the public affairs duties for TSA, and that ranges from everything like what I'm doing right now to answering media inquiries, working with stakeholders, that type of thing, representing the TSA. And I've been doing this for 10 years now, which is hard to believe. So I'll introduce Teresa to you, and then we'll start with our presentation. Go ahead, Teresa.
Yes, hi. My name is Teresa Lamlin, and I've been with TSA for over 3.5 years, and I work at the San Diego International Airport.
And one thing Teresa, of course, is too modest to say is that she has received additional training on how to work with people who may have a special circumstance, a medical issue, a disability, those types of things. And she's received that training. And so she's called upon frequently to help travelers. And so she's going to be a real asset to us tonight as we learn about those travel hacks. So I really appreciate her joining me for this. So I'm going to go ahead and do a presentation that's going to set the stage for what we're going to talk about. And it'll take me just a few minutes to go through this, but I think it'll be really valuable information, whether you watch this live or whether you watch this as a recording. So the first thing is TSA, when the pandemic started, made modifications to our security procedures. We titled those Stay Healthy, Stay Secure. The idea was that we wanted to make sure that we had the most healthy environment for the travelers and for our employees, all without compromising security, because ultimately we're a security agency. There were 4 main elements of the Stay Healthy, Stay Secure campaign. One was, of course, the social distancing, the reduced physical contact, the personal protective equipment that you would see our officers and travelers wearing, and cleaning and disinfecting. And I want to talk about each of those in a little more detail. Now, even though the term social distancing at this time last year, it was everywhere, you don't see it as much, but it certainly is something that can help keep you healthy. When you get to the airport, please be very cognizant of the space around you. The more space you can leave around you, the better it is for you, because you're going to be around a lot of people who you don't know where they've been, who they've had contact with. And it can be difficult to do at an airport because there are tight spaces, but you can always try to take that step or two back as you approach the security checkpoint. You can allow that extra space in front of you and around you. And I think that you'll find that's very helpful. Keep in mind on the tables where people remove the items from their carry-on luggage, maybe put their shoes in a bin, that type of thing. Just allow for that space to wait a few extra seconds. We highly recommend that, whether there's signage to do so or not. The other thing is we made procedures that reduce that physical contact. An example was we have the acrylic barriers in place in the security checkpoint between our officers who have the closest contact with travelers. It can make it more difficult to hear what they're saying, in large part because they're going to be wearing that mask and that barrier's in the place. But just if you can't hear them, just say, I can't understand what you're saying. I can't hear you. They'll repeat that for you. Know that our officers come in contact with hundreds of people during the day, and those barriers are in place to ensure that there's no potential cross-contamination in those areas where we know there is the closest contact. Also, at many airports, travelers will be asked to hold onto their own boarding pass and scan it themselves without having to hand it over to the TSA officer. You'll be given that direction, but the reason that change was made is we wanted to make sure that that there was the reduced physical contact. You might also be asked to hold up your boarding pass for a physical inspection. Just go ahead, or visual inspection. So just go ahead and do that if you're asked to do that. That's all part of the modified procedures. We've also installed new types of technology and security checkpoints across the country, and this does include San Diego International Airport. The first is computer tomography scanners. Those are 3D X-ray scanners that give our officers a clearer view of the contents of the carry-on luggage. Now, the reason that's so important is because they can usually resolve a security or a potential security threat on screen without having to do that bag check. We know that people don't want to have a bag check. Our officers don't want to go into travelers' bags, but they are required by the responsibilities of their job to go ahead and make sure every security threat is resolved. By getting the 3D image of the contents of the bag, they're able to rotate that, pivot it, they're able to slice it. If there's an electronic bag, they're able to remove that electronic to look at it on screen by itself, because that's a capability of the technology. So it's just an extra tool for them that really does help the travelers. Once again, we do have some of these units at the airport in San Diego. And then the last thing I like to point out is if you are screened through a lane that has one of these computer tomography scanners, you're allowed to leave everything in your bag, your electronics, your travel size liquids. And if you're traveling with food, you can leave that in your bag as well. So it's more convenient for you. Things aren't going to go in the bins, which of course the bin is a public use item. So that's also healthier for you. So you'll be able to tell these units, they're a little bigger than the usual X-ray that you may be used to seeing. And an officer will tell you, leave those items in your bag. Once again, computer tomography is very similar to the medical technology you're used to hearing about, a CT scan. It's essentially that for carry-on luggage. The second item we have is the credential authentication technology that is used for the photo identification verification. It is a unit where your driver's license is inserted into the unit. It goes ahead and just because of the capabilities of the unit, it's able to pull your name, your biographical information, as well as your photo ID and display that on a screen for the officer. They're able then to also see your flight information and what type of screening you're eligible for, whether that's general screening, TSA Precheck, or for some passengers, they may require additional screening. That cues our officers for that. Everything is presented on the screen in the exact same place every time, which then allows for them to ensure that the traveler is confirmed as someone who's traveling within the next 24 hours is what it's looking for. It is connected electronically to what we call our secure flight system. That essentially is the database of people who are traveling within the next 24 hours. Yeah, is there a question now?
There is. Going back to the CT, which of course, I'd like to just say I got to see in action last weekend here in San Diego. I was actually wondering why they told me to leave my laptop where it was. Is there a way that you can tell if there's like a choice? Can a traveler opt into the CT scan line? Or I think you mentioned something about the size, but can you go into that a little bit more?
Yes, so that's a great question. So we have them in the checkpoint in different positions. You can self-select to go into the CT scanner lane, but a lot of times, especially at some of our larger checkpoints, you just go to the one that as the line progresses into the travel document checking function and the lanes behind. But yes, you could self-select that if you want. And for people who want the convenience of leaving everything in their bag, that might be an option for them. But yes, you'll see them in the checkpoint. For a lot of people, especially the casual traveler, they may not be able to tell offhand which one is the CT scanner. But definitely, if you see it, you've used it before and you want to use it again, we would encourage you to do it. It's just an added tool that we have for our officers, that we have for travelers. There's currently slightly over 300 units right now in use, and TSA is buying more units to expand the number that we have available at airports. So it is going to become more common. Okay. So back to the credential authentication technology. At some airports, the units are actually turned around so the traveler inserts their own ID into the unit. That's another way that we reduce the physical contact. What's helpful about that is the traveler would insert the credential authentication or their driver's license or the passport. They would have it scanned by the unit, and then it pulls up the information on screen. The TSA officer will ask the traveler to briefly adjust their mask to verify their identity, put the mask back on, and then continue into the checkpoint. It's just a way that we're using technology to ensure that there isn't any type of security incident or somebody entering into the checkpoint who's not a ticketed traveler. I wanted to ask you, Teresa, do we have the units at San Diego turned around for travelers to insert their own IDs, or does the TSA officer do that?
At this time, we do that.
Okay, so at some airports, you'll be asked to do it yourself. There's a variety of factors that impact whether you will do it or the TSA officer will do it. Some of it is just a space that's available. Some of it has to do with the configuration of the unit. So just wait to have the officer tell you what you need to do, and then you'll be able to proceed. So thank you, Teresa. The next thing is I really want people to understand that how they pack their carry-on has a major effect on what may happen when they come into the security checkpoint. First of all, if you bring those prohibited items, those knives, those oversized liquids, we don't want to see those in our carry-on luggage because those will require a bag check. The most common thing we see are martial arts items, knives, as well as tools over 7 inches in length. And they also see a lot of power tools coming to the checkpoint. Those aren't allowed in your carry-on luggage. I'm going to talk about some resources to help you understand what you can and cannot bring. All of those are great in your checked baggage, but if you bring them to the checkpoint, you're going to find, once again, that you're going to have a bag check, and that's not something that we're encouraging. The other thing is when you have belts and laptops and those items, place them in your carry-on. That was not a good example. When you have your belts, wallets, coins, those type of things, place those in your carry-on luggage. Don't put those in a bin. Bins, once again, are a common use item, and putting your personal items in there increases the risk of that cross-contamination. Also, by just securing them in your carry-on luggage, you're not going to leave them behind. There is a robust lost and found operation at most airports because people forget they leave their items behind because they're in a bit of a hurry, or they're not familiar with what they're doing, and then they leave them behind in the bins, or they leave them behind on a bench. We don't want to see that, but by putting them in your carry-on secure, you're going to have them with you. The last thing is, if you are traveling with food, if you go through a traditional X-ray screening lane, put your food in maybe a gallon Ziploc bag or something. If you're asked to remove your food, I don't want to see apples and things like that rolling around in a bin, because if you want to eat that a few minutes later, you may not have the ability to clean it, wash it as you normally would at home. But by having it in a plastic bag, it's going to help ensure that it's ready for you to eat when it's time. So those are just some general tips to keep in mind. How you pack your bag will help determine what your experience is in the checkpoint. The next thing is, our officers for months now have been wearing personal protective equipment. You're going to see them wearing the surgical masks. Some officers still wear a shield. Of course, they do wear gloves. They have worn those for even prior to the pandemic. But a traveler can ask a TSA officer to change their gloves if they're going to require a bag check or a pat down. And that way we ensure that the gloves are clean. Our officers also will change their gloves every 30 minutes in the checkpoint. And that's just something to keep in mind. Now, we do know that in addition to seeing our officers in face masks everywhere in the nation's transportation system, face masks are required. That means the moment you step into the airport, to check your bag, to print your boarding pass, all of those things, you need to be wearing a mask. If you come to the security checkpoint and you are not wearing a mask, you'll be asked to put on a mask. If you do not have a mask, you'll be offered a mask. If you refuse to wear that mask, you'll be denied entry into the security checkpoint. So please keep that in mind. Of course, if you're not screened through the security checkpoint, you're not going to travel, and it's not going to be a very good day for you. The current face mask requirement is in place until January 2022. And at this point, we are pleased to see that the vast majority of travelers do adhere to the face mask requirement. It's no secret that we've seen many incidents, especially those viral videos of unruly passengers. Some of those incidents are tied to mask wearing. We would ask everybody just to take a deep breath, to wear your mask, to know that when you're traveling, you need to have that. It needs to fit snugly across your face, cover your mouth and your nose. And it's for your health and safety as well as everybody around you. I will add that TSA is able to levy civil penalties against travelers who refuse to wear a mask. There's a reporting system in place, whether you're an airport operator, an airline operator, so that you can report that to TSA. TSA will review the circumstances surrounding the incident and will determine what fine would be placed. Of course, there's also a mitigation process, but we don't want to see that. We want to see people wearing their masks, like I said, for their own safety and health. So please keep that in mind. It also applies to ferries and to buses and trains. It's anywhere in the nation's transportation system. So please keep that in mind. Another thing I want to talk about is the cleaning and disinfecting. We do have that in place where officers are wiping out the bins. They're cleaning those high-touch surfaces. We know where travelers are touching in the checkpoint, most commonly touched areas. And so we're keeping those clean. Also, the airports have additional janitorial services that they have brought in to help keep things clean. But there's really no substitute for you making sure that you keep your health and safety in mind. I always recommend washing your hands before you go into the security checkpoint and washing them immediately after you come out of the security checkpoint, because that is an area where a lot of people go through. We're talking about thousands a day who are screened at the airport in San Diego, for example, and other airports across the country. So just keep that in mind. It can be difficult to do when you have a lot on your mind, but once again, keep in mind that your health and safety is the most important to us during this time. Something many people may not be aware of is that TSA is allowing an increased amount of hand sanitizer over our normal liquids restriction. What I mean by that is usually liquids in carry-on luggage need to be 3.4 ounces, which is 100 milliliters or less to be in carry-on luggage. But because of what's going on, we're allowing up to a 12-ounce container per traveler in your carry-on luggage. So that way you have your hand sanitizer when you get to the gate, when you're on board the aircraft, and when you get to your destination, picking up your luggage or what have you. You don't have to wait until you have your hand sanitizer. You can bring that larger container. And so we know a lot of travelers take care of that. We just ask that you remove that from your carry-on luggage. So our officer, in case they need to do some additional screening, they will know it's hand sanitizer. And when it won't be flagged when it's in your carry-on luggage and they don't know it's hand sanitizer. So please do that and keep it in mind. It certainly is something that can really help you without having to go buy smaller quantities. So that's something that had changed. I always like to touch on TSA Precheck. That is our expedited screening process that allows people to leave their shoes on, leaves their laptops in their bag, their travel size liquids in their bag, allows them to leave their belts on. They don't need to remove those as long as their belt buckle doesn't have a high metal content. You can also wear a light jacket or an outer sweater, which can be really convenient this time of year. And you can also leave food in your carry-on bags. This program has been around for about 10 years now. Millions of people have enrolled. It requires you to go to an enrollment center to provide basic biographical information about yourself to prove who you are. It also requires a set of fingerprints. We do a background check on applicants for TSA Precheck. The vast majority of Americans are eligible for Precheck once they enroll. The types of crimes that would make you ineligible are transportation-related crimes, as well as identity-related crimes. If you have criminal convictions for those, you would not be eligible for this TSA Precheck. But because most people don't have that, we encourage them to consider enrolling. There is an $85 charge. It does cover a 5-year period, and you can renew online after 5 years for $70. Children who are traveling on an itinerary with an adult who's eligible for TSA Precheck, 12 and under, can go through the TSA Precheck lane with that parent or guardian. So that's a nice way to ensure, if you're traveling with your family members, that you'll be able to do so through the TSA PreCheck lane. Once that child turns 13, they need to qualify on their own for TSA PreCheck, and we can help you figure out the identity requirements for that. So keep that in mind. There are local enrollment offices there. I think there are 3 or 4 of them in the San Diego area. In fact, the Staples, the office store, has a partnership with TSA PreCheck, and they offer enrollment right there. So here's some of the things. We also have, of course, an enrollment center right at the airport, and the Staples stores there in those locations. Once again, the $85 enrollment fee, that is a processing and application fee. And then, of course, the stat there at the top, 95% of travelers nationwide waited 5 minutes or less to be screened through a TSA PreCheck lane. Really helpful for people who have special needs coming through the checkpoint to know that that won't be an extended experience for them. I want to make kind of a side comment right now as we head into the Thanksgiving travel season. AAA put out its travel estimates, and they're thinking that the Thanksgiving air travel period they're estimating will be at pre-pandemic levels. TSA has not made its projections yet, but if you look at the general number of people traveling, we will seem to agree that that could be the case. So there will be a lot of people at the airport around Thanksgiving in that compressed holiday period. So programs like TSA PreCheck will really help you. If you were to enroll tomorrow in TSA PreCheck and you're eligible, you will have the known traveler number that is required in your reservation to make you eligible for TSA PreCheck. So if you've been thinking about it, act now and you won't be disappointed this holiday season. So the other way you can find local enrollment centers, if you're not in the San Diego areas, you can go to universalenroll.dhs.gov and enter the name of the city where you are. You select TSA PreCheck enrollment, and it will give you the 10 closest enrollment centers to you. You click on that, it will tell you the hours. You can also begin the enrollment process online where you enter your basic biographical information at the tsa.gov/precheck website. So something to keep in mind, definitely is something that people should consider if you're concerned about that process of going through the security checkpoint. Now, I want to go through some of the resources that we have online. And the first one is the one I have here in the presentation. This is not interactive, so I'm going to go right now and I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, and I'm going to go to some websites so I can show you how these work. Okay. No, that's not the one I'm looking for. I'm looking for my web browser. Hold on. Let me see here. Yep. Okay. So the first one I wanted to show you, can everybody see that? Yes. Wonderful. Very good. So this is a website on the tsa.gov main website, and I'll make sure that you have this for future reference with the links. And what's really nice about this is it describes some of the basic procedures, and then there's a drop-down section that lists a variety of circumstances that will give you special information on what to expect. So for example, if you have implants and medical devices, it tells you what that process is, what you need to know, talks about the best type of screening through the security checkpoint. If you have implants or internal medical devices that maybe alarm the walk-through metal detector, ask to go through the body scanner. That's a tip that's very helpful. Also, if you have an ostomy, for example, or another type of medical device, it tells you what you need to know to ensure that when you go through the security checkpoint, you know what to expect, you know what will be expected of you, and it will make your trip much more, I would say, streamlined. And also, again, if you know what to expect, you're going to have a more a successful trip through. Now, this is in addition to working with a passenger support specialist. So you have, as a traveler, the right to contact TSA 72 hours prior to your departure. You're going to be asked to describe what type of situation you have, what type of assistance you might need. You'll be asked which airport you'll be departing from, your flight information, and that will be passed to the airport. They'll make contact with you as a traveler, and they will provide you as much or as little help as you think you might need. That can include meeting you at the curb, meeting you outside the checkpoint, and taking you as far as you need into the airport to ensure that things go smoothly through you. We have specially trained passenger support specialists like Teresa, who's received additional training beyond what all of the officers receive. What's very helpful about that is because they do this regularly with passengers, they're very in tune with the specific needs of the travelers. And I'll have Teresa address that a little later. But I want people to be aware of these resources because they're so valuable. The next resource I want to point out is we have a Civil Rights and Civil Liberties office. If you feel like during your screening experience, things didn't go well for you, you felt like something was not as it was supposed to be, you can reach out to the Civil Rights and Civil Liberties office, and they will follow up with you. We want to know when that's not the case. We want people to know that they do have an avenue by which they can be heard, and that is the proper place to bring that complaint. We know in the security checkpoint that at any time during the screening process, a traveler can ask for a supervisor. A supervisor will respond to wherever the traveler is. We'll try to see what's going on. We'll talk to the traveler. We'll talk to the TSA officer to make sure that things go smoothly. But if you feel like you need to have someone else present, asking for a supervisor is the first step in making that happen. It's also a great way to ensure that situations don't escalate in the security checkpoint. We don't want people to leave unhappy. We don't want them to feel like their concerns weren't heard, and we always want people to know they have options. The last thing I want to point out that I had mentioned earlier is the What Can I Bring tool. This is a feature on the TSA website where you can literally enter the name of an item, and it will tell you how to travel with it. So I'm going to enter umbrella. People may not know if they can bring an umbrella. I'm going to search for it, and it will tell you. In your carry-on bag, they're allowed, but there may be a restriction on the airline, which is separate from TSA. You can also place it in your checked bag. That's very simple. It's very straightforward. You'll know how to travel with your umbrella. You won't need to worry about that. Another one that I like to talk about is Apple, for example. Apple, absolutely. You can put those in your carry-on luggage. But maybe there are restrictions from other parts of the government about traveling with fruit to other countries, that kind of thing. It will tag that for you, of course, allowed in your checked baggage. And then there's the special sections down here below where you can look and get more information if you're just looking for general information on different types of items to bring in your carry-on luggage. It is an invaluable tool. You can get it on the website itself, which you will have, but we also have a My TSA app that you can download to your phone that has the same feature. So on the go, you can enter those things. It'll pop up right there on your phone or mobile device. And the last thing is on social media. TSA has an account both on Facebook and on Twitter that is called Ask TSA. And what that does is it allows you to even send a picture or a comment or a description to the Ask TSA team. Many of the members of the Ask TSA team are former TSA officers themselves, so they're very familiar with the procedures. It allows you to get that information before you come to the airport. So it's just another tool. I have this slide up right now on the TSA notification card. This is available also on the TSA website. It allows a traveler to discreetly communicate with the TSA officer if they have a special need or a disability. I must stress that this is not required. If you fill this out and you forget it at home, no worries. You can even hand them a note. The other thing is people need to understand that this does not exempt them from screening. Okay, there's a misconception from some travelers that they think if they have this note, a doctor's note, that they won't go through screening. Every traveler must be screened. And I'll make sure that you have a link to this card as well if you prefer to download it from the website or write your own note. Okay, then once again, the Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties will give you that link. And that brings us to the end of the presentation. My contact information is on there. My email address, my phone number, and I do have a Twitter account where I put information that's very helpful to travelers. I also have Teresa's contact information in there, and she can be reached by email if you have those questions. We would encourage you to reach out to us to provide us the feedback that you have, just to let you know that we're here for you. We're here to make your trip successful. We're here to keep you secure. And through all of that, we're your partner, and you're a partner with us to make that happen. So we'll provide that to you in writing as well, so you have it. But there we go. Okay. I can see there's a lot of messages in the chat, and I want to first ask Teresa if you have anything to add right now.
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to add is that, just pack your patience and realize that traveling is a little bit more difficult nowadays because of the COVID pandemic. So as Lori stated, everything is pretty much in black and white on the screen. If you follow the instructions and get there at least 2 hours early ahead of time, you'll have time to go over all the things that are important to you and your family members. And, as we said before, we'd like to see people be satisfied with our security procedures, and make sure that your traveling is as comfortable and pleasant as it can be. Because once you board your aircraft, that also presents a whole different situation as well. So come with a good attitude, get a good night's sleep, have a decent breakfast if you can, and we're here to help you. That's what we do. We're here to serve not only our passengers, but we're here to serve our country and what we believe in, and that's security. To make sure that once you pass through our security process, we want you to leave with a good feeling that we've done our job, and that we served you well.
Mm-hmm. So it reminds me that about 16% of the TSA workforce are veterans, and that includes Teresa, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, we like to say they continue to serve our country. They have a commitment to the mission. And we also have a campaign that's getting ready to be launched, asking people to treat our officers kindly, to treat them gently when they come through the checkpoint. We know that for a lot of people, this is not what they enjoy doing, but of course it is there for their own safety, their own security. So just keep that in mind. Someone like Teresa served her country in a different capacity. She's doing this now, and she's really doing it for you. So please keep that in mind, regardless of the situation. So we now want to open it up for questions or comments, whatever you have.
I'm going to ask one question before we completely open up, and then we'll probably stop recording and let people kind of come up and ask their own questions. Could you go over issues, a couple things that come up often in our community are particularly families that are trying to travel with youngsters or adults who have a more challenging or complex behavioral profile, where we're really trying to, again, I appreciated the pre-check, and, as much as we can streamline that process, but sometimes, we get all the way through and then we have a behavior kind of at the front of the line, and that derailed everything. What is your recommendation to a family that encounters that? I mean, obviously we're all trying to keep masks on and really trying our best. Is that a time to ask for a supervisor and see if you can regroup off to the side, or what else could we do?
So there's a couple of things. I think the best thing to do in this circumstance would be, if you can swing it, go ahead and do a trial run at the airport someday. Contact TSA, explain the circumstance, that you're concerned that, we do better when we know what to expect, and that means our entire family, and see if you can make a visit to the checkpoint in advance and go through those steps up to the screening portion, so they know what will be expected of them, especially for children who've never flown before. I have had the privilege of meeting families who were never able to fly before. And once they engaged through TSA Cares and work with a passenger support specialist, they were able to fly and see grandma for the first time, or they were able to go to Florida to Disney World for the first time, that they never thought was possible because they didn't think they could make it through the checkpoint. They just knew there was going to be a meltdown, or they knew that there was going to be too much confusion, and they were embarrassed. There's no need for you to be embarrassed. Reach out for help. And if what would be helpful is previewing it, then ask for that preview. We'll have an officer available to show you that. Then on the day of, some of those very tips that Teresa said. Come rested, make sure you're fed, make sure that when you come to the checkpoint that you are ready for that experience. You're familiar with each step. You're not bringing prohibited items that can sort of throw you off. That may be a favorite item that you have that you brought that you shouldn't have. And then you're given options. And one of them is to leave it behind if you can't return it to your car or you can't check it. And that can upset people. So make sure you don't put yourself in the situation where you have to make that decision. And the last one is make sure if you think a passenger support specialist would make your trip through better, we're here to help you. We provide that service to ensure that not only you and your family makes it through well, but all of the other people around you. We don't want anybody to feel ashamed that that's not something they can do, because it is something that you can do with the proper help. And once again, you can ask for as little or as much help as you need. And in that case, it's tailor-made for you. And I would just put a plug in for passenger support specialists. They love helping people. That's why they volunteered for the program. And so, Tress, I'm going to ask you if you have anything to add to that, but I've seen you and people like you in action, and I know it makes a huge difference.
Oh, yes. I really enjoy interacting with all types of family members and people of different culture and backgrounds. And if there's anything that I can do to help them to ease the process, I'm all for it. Any questions, I'm there.
I also want to add, and this I think is very relevant to your audience, if you're not a native English speaker and you're coming to the checkpoint, we have officers and they'll wear a special tag on their uniform that says what language they speak. So if you need that language assistance, you can ask a TSA officer for that. You could ask for a supervisor. And if they have somebody on staff on duty at that time, they'll be able to help you. So that's very good. And once again, our officers love using their additional language skills. You'll find that there's such a variety of languages that they speak. So go ahead, give them a try. You may find that you really benefit from that.
Yes.
Okay. And then I was going to ask, just generically, I know you're the TSA and you're that screening process, but in terms of any tips for travelers just in general, once you get through TSA, what about any tips for getting through airports? I'm thinking places like O'Hare and Dallas, Fort Worth are kind of notorious, at least for those of us that travel back and forth. Go ahead.
Yeah, so there are some airports that have programs and they are able to, for example, some airports, I'm thinking specifically of Minneapolis, St. Paul, they have a special lanyard you can wear that's a special color. And what it is for every airport worker, they know if someone's wearing a lanyard like that they may need some special assistance. And that's a program that's just available to anybody. You can reach out in advance to the airport where you're going and describe to them what your special need might be and see if they have something. I also know that some airports have special apps for those who have low vision, for example, and it's able to either narrate real time through a phone call that you make to get you through the airport. So for example, if you know you need to go to a certain concourse or to a certain gate, they're familiar with that layout because it's a relationship the airport has with that service, and they'll walk and talk you through that. If you need to go to a concession, same thing, they'll help you. So keep that in mind. Also, don't be embarrassed to ask your airline for a wheelchair if that will in fact help you, because they'll provide that service to you as a traveler. And once again, they'll provide as much or as little assistance as you need. Our TSA officers work with those in wheelchairs all the time. And so we're used to seeing them come to the checkpoint. We have a screening process for that. The first thing we'll ask is, are you able to stand to go through the body scanner or the walk-through metal detector? And if you aren't, they have a process by which to screen you still. So there's many options for you to make it easier. Don't be embarrassed to ask for those. They're there for you. And we know that for everybody who's in their best situation while traveling, it's going to be better for not only you, but everybody around you. But once again, I need to stress, for example, if you have a wheelchair, either your own or the airport provided one, the airline provided one, there does need to be a screening process, and it will be made for whatever your circumstance is. Teresa, can you describe the process by which you offer private screening for travelers?
Yes, it varies from individual to individual. We look at the situation that they're in. We're not nurses or doctors. We just ask them, can you stand? Can you go through? And if they deny that I cannot, then the options are that we will pat them down.
Mhm.
And if they feel that they don't want to be, as you say, looked at in front of the public view, we offer them the private screening, and they can bring a family member, and it can be of the opposite gender. If they are traveling by themselves, we offer maybe an immediate person that was standing next to them if they'd be willing to do that. I have not witnessed that yet, but 9 times out of 10, it's always a family member with them, and generally we will have another female officer in that room with, myself and the family member, or maybe a friendly passenger that's willing to volunteer.
And that private screening area is located just off of the checkpoint in that general vicinity. So it's not going to be as if you need to walk to another area of the airport that would make it inconvenient or a deterrent. It would be right there. It's just something that we offer travelers. We know that some people are very self-conscious. The vast majority of people are fine being screened out in the public, but it's always given as an option.